friends. Welcome into Talking Sports at Work. I am your host, Eric Persley. Happy draft day. I don't know. Draft is, I compared it to Christmas yesterday. It's almost, it has some characteristics with Hanukkah as well, I guess, because it's still going on. It's not even over yet. Bear with me just one second. I just took a drink of my caffeine energy shot, which, shit, I just remembered I meant to cut down on these. I think they're making my face break out. Something has been making my face break out now for weeks, and I haven't been able to identify it. I've cut back on sugar. I've changed several things. I don't eat really greasy food much anymore. I can't figure it out. And so I started looking into it, and I started thinking, what's the one thing that I've been doing more of lately that, or that I've been taking a medicine or, anything that I've been eating or drinking, and it hit me. I've been drinking a lot more caffeine than I usually, and I always drink a lot of caffeine, but over the last few weeks, I've probably been overdoing it. So I'm going to try to cut those back a little bit. So that's the only one of those I'm going to have today. I've already had 2 cups of coffee. I'll probably maybe have another little cup of coffee or something midday, but that's it. And that is actually cutting back slightly for me. Anywho, so we have a lot to talk about today. I have more notes for just a regular podcast day than maybe ever, especially given that, well, maybe not ever, but especially given that I've just done an episode yesterday, just did an episode the day before. I've done episodes either on YouTube or on the podcast for the last 4 days now. But man, it's draft day, draft weekend, draft time. So there is a lot to talk about. So we're just going to dive straight on in. I'm going to take a quick little break. Consider this my intro. I'll be right back. All right, friends, we're back. So, got a lot to talk about. I don't even know where to start. Things pretty much went as expected for the first 4 picks. And then the Chargers ruined my night by taking Joe Alt. The Giants did what I think they should have done, which is taking Malik Nabers, who I think is a true elite number 1 receiver. I think he's the next Jamar Chase, really. But he's actually even faster. I know that, it could be viewed that J.J. McCarthy fell in their lap, but I've said all along, I don't think that I'm not a big fan of his. If anything, my comp for him was a mobile Kirk Cousins or a slightly better version of Daniel Jones. And that's not what the Giants need. So I said all along, if Drake May falls in their lap, they should do that. Otherwise, no. Take Nabers if he's sitting there. And that's what they did. Then the Titans. If you watched the show yesterday, we did a live episode. It was pretty cool. We had a handful of people watching. So, some popped in and out, and it was pretty neat. My reaction was not great. And the entire time, from the time I saw Joe Alt taken at 5 till, it was probably another 25 minutes until our pick was announced. I think you could probably feel the tension, and I hate that I did that, because it felt like I was making my kids tense too, because they could feel it in me, and they saw my reaction to Alt going 5. But I tried to ease things up. I ended up playing football with Jack for a few minutes and messing around. But anyway, so yeah, for the next few minutes, next almost half hour, I'm tense. I'm kind of mentally scrambling and doing it out loud because I'm doing a show. And I said, okay, if Nabers is still on the board, I guess that's got to be the pick, right? I mean, he's not a can't miss, but he's pretty close. I think he's still the second best behind Marvin Harrison Jr., but he's the best, deep threat speedster. He's like I said, I think he's Jamar Chase. So even though that's not a need, that's maybe the way we've got to go. It is still a need, but not the biggest need. But then the Giants do what they should have done. And honestly, at that point, I was kind of thinking the Giants might take McCarthy here. But then they do the right thing. They take Nabers. And so now we've got another, 10 minutes, 15 minutes of me kind of mentally scrambling and thinking, okay, what do we do? What I was saying is I think we trade back here. If anybody is willing, Minnesota has got to be making some sort of offer, right? JJ McCarthy is still available. Nobody's jumped them. Nobody's taken him. They've got to be calling. They've got to be talking. So I don't know what the offer is going to be. It's not going to be both of those first round picks, but it's going to be at least a second round pick. You got to think to move up 4 spots and get your quarterback. Let's take it. But that didn't happen. I don't know if they weren't offering or if the offer they gave just wasn't enough or if we just liked Latham. But then the pick comes in and it's JC Latham. And I am thinking, what the hell? So for those of you who, watched my reaction last night, you know how I felt about it. I did not believe that it made a lot of sense to draft a guy, when we've got nobody to play left tackle and you draft a guy who spent his entire collegiate career on the right side. Now, it was maybe an hour or so later. I'm researching, I'm asking questions on social media, I'm trying to figure it out, and I find an article, or well, it's actually, an interview with Latham where it was Jim Wyatt, I guess. It was on Paul Kaharski's Twitter, but I think Jim Wyatt was the one actually doing the interview. And they said that they were planning to switch him to left tackle, and Latham said, yes, we had spoken about that. That is the plan. Bill Callahan, who is, widely viewed as one of, if not the best offensive line coach in football right now, one of the best of all time, was obviously very involved in this pick. And so you got to trust him. And he said that he had spoken with him, that Latham and Bill Callahan had spoken. They do plan to move him to the left side. And hearing that made me feel a good bit better about it. Because if Bill Callahan believes this guy can move to the left side and play and protect Will Levis's blind side, then I'm good with it. It just feels like you don't see that much. You see usually on college teams, the best tackle is going to play on the left side. And so you might see guys who played left tackle throughout their collegiate career switch to the right side in the NFL, but you don't often see it the other way around. But you know what? It's not as symmetrical. It's not so much that way anymore, and it's moving to where it's becoming less and less that way, where really you just need, excuse me, let me pause for just 1 minute. Sorry, I'll finish this thought in a minute. I just remembered something I got. All right, hey friends, back again. Sorry about that. So anyway, what I was saying is the way defenses play now and the way, it's a passing league, you need guys on both sides who are solid pass protectors. Defenses are going to put their guys in position to attack the weakest link. So you need guys on both sides who can pass block and run block. It's not like there's a strong side now and a weak side so much, or the strong side and the passing protector on the left side. It's really not that much that way anymore, but it is very important, to protect your quarterback's blind side. And that's why your best pass blocker is going to go on the left side for most teams, or for the Dolphins, or now soon to be the Falcons eventually. With a left-handed quarterback, it's flipped. But anyway, JC Latham, I said all along, is the best right tackle in this draft, but I just don't know that he can make the switch to the left side. But if Bill Callahan believes that he can, then all right, I'm on board with this pick. I'm fine with it now. I still would have preferred Alt because it just felt safer, but that was not an option. JC Latham, NFL.com actually has him as the highest rated tackle in the draft, and other sources do as well. It's just a matter of everyone considers him to be a right tackle, and that is a different position. But again, Ran Carthon, Titans GM, has said he's moving to the left side. Latham himself has said that he's moving to the left side. So that is definitively the plan. And Bill Callahan believes that he can do it and is the best choice for us there. I'm okay with it. So there's my spiel on the Titans. And that's really not just fan speak. And I talked about this last night, too, about how we come to terms with things as fans. No matter what decisions your team might make or who they draft or who they trade for or what they do, you end up rationalizing it to where you're okay with it. That's just part of being a fan. You're going to root for the guys that your team has. No matter how it is and no matter how you may feel about it in the moment, eventually you're going to convince yourself that it's okay. That's not what's happening here. I really do logically, like rationally believe now that this is okay. The reason I was so mad about it was that it felt like blew a 7th overall pick on a right tackle, which is just not as important as the left side. But given that he's going to play on the left side, and that Bill Callahan, the best offensive line in the game, best offensive line coach in the game, believes that he can do it, and it is the right option, I'm good with this now. I mean, again, a lot of sources had him rated as the highest tackle in the draft. So, okay, if he can play on the left side, I'm happy with it. He's definitely a monster of a man. He's a hell of a run blocker. He is a mauler. And if he can hold up well in pass protection against the great pass rushers in the NFL and protect Will Levis's blind side, then I'm happy. So, we got that covered. Now, here's the other thing that I wanted to dive into. And that is, no matter, I was thinking about it late last night, and towards the end of the draft, because I let the kids stay up pretty late, and Jack actually ended up staying up later than any of them, of course, because he loves football like me, and he wants to stick with Daddy and watch the draft. I ended up going to bed before it was over, but still keeping up with it on my phone. But yeah, as I was watching, I was thinking, you know what? No matter how I feel about this, anyway, no matter how I feel about this right now, at least I feel better than Buffalo Bills fans must feel right now, and probably Atlanta Falcons fans as well. Because, man, that was just right after our pick, and it took all the attention. Anything anybody was going to talk about with J.C. Latham was now gone, which sucks because I would like to have heard more of coverage of our guy. Excuse me, but right after our pick, Schefter comes on and says that the Falcons might actually be looking at a quarterback, might actually want Penix here. I don't know, man. From what I heard, Raheem Morris, the new head coach, absolutely loves Michael Penix, and I've been on record as saying I like him. I see him as being like Tua 2.0, like just a newer, younger version of Tua Tagovailoa. And it's not just the left-handed thing, and it's not just the injury history. They've got the same sort of timing and accuracy and quick release and the ability to play effectively from the pocket as long as they're protected. I just really see a lot of Tua in him. And so if he's that, then they got their quarterback for the future. The problem is, obviously, that I thought the Falcons were supposed to be in win now mode. And I talked to a friend of mine at work who's a big Falcons fan this morning, and he was saying, at first he was really upset. I talked to him a little bit last night, just texting with him. He was pissed. And then I talked to him this morning, and he did what we all do, what I was just talking about. We justified things, and he rationalized it. But what he said was accurate too. And I even was thinking about this last night as well. Everybody, if this is right, if they hit on this pick, nobody's going to care. Everybody in Atlanta is going to be thrilled, and this is going to be great for them if he turns out to be good. Now, a lot of people think it's a reach. A lot of people think he was not a top 10 talent. You can feel however you want to feel about that, but if they hit on this guy, who cares? Then this is a great, not good, a great pick. And he was looking at it the same way kind of that I was, that, this Kirk Cousins thing is really only a 2-year deal. That's going to give Penix plenty of time to sit and learn and prepare. But it's just the other side of it, and this is the more obvious thing, it kind of reminds me in some ways of what the Titans did a few years ago with one of the worst trade in franchise history when we sent A.J. Brown to – I just got a notification on my watch that says Terry Fontenot says that Michael Penix could sit for 4 or 5 years. What? Okay, that makes no sense whatsoever. They realize he's 24, right? Okay, I don't even know about that. I don't even know what that means. I wonder what Bill Belichick said about this. He was on the Pat McAfee coverage, but I wasn't watching it. He was on the Pat McAfee show on the ESPN coverage. They had their own little show of the draft, and I kind of wish I would have watched that because he was very close to being the coach of the Atlanta Falcons. I guarantee you he wouldn't have taken Michael Penix. But anyway, yeah, if they hit on this, nobody's going to care. And it reminds me, though, of two things. And one of these worked, one of these did not. Now, this is a very different thing, but when the Titans traded A.J. Brown, the this is obviously completely different, but it reminds me of the mindset that I was thinking, what the hell is John Robinson thinking? We are supposed to be in win now mode. You don't trade away a 26-year-old superstar receiver and then for a pick that you hope best case scenario is going to be as good as him when your team is coming off three straight playoff appearances. Your team has been in the AFC Championship game a few years ago. Your team was the number one seed in the AFC last year. Your team has maybe 1 to 2 years left with this core group of Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill. You're supposed to be in win now mode, and you trade away a superstar receiver when it's already a position of need. We already needed another receiver. Anyway, I'm not going to get all into that because that's just going to get me way too fired up. But the thing is, it felt like John Robinson is trying to sit the fence and trying to build for the future too much when he should be looking at the present and trying to win now. And it feels like maybe the Falcons kind of did that same thing. Now, it's obviously a completely different situation. It's a completely different thing, but it kind of reminded me of that mindset. It made me think, is that what their front office is doing? Maybe looking forward too much when they should be focusing on now. I'm not saying that's the case, but it could be. Now, here's the other thing that this reminds me of, though. And this is a few years ago when a team in the NFC North had a great quarterback, one of the greatest of all time. They need help. They need a wide receiver specifically. They're in their first round pick, and what do? They take a quarterback because this guy's ending the end of his career. And obviously, we're talking about Aaron Rodgers here and the Packers. They take a quarterback. Everybody bashed them. Everybody said, this is crazy. What are you doing? You've got a couple years left with Rodgers, and now you're taking this guy. You need a receiver. They ended up getting Christian Watkins in the second round of that draft, and he's turned out to be pretty good. But everybody just, tore that to pieces because it didn't make a lot of sense for where they were. And now we look at them. They are young, and they are one of the hottest and skyrocketing, trending upward teams right there with the Texans in the NFL. And it's all largely because they have Jordan Love at quarterback, and he was able to sit and learn and watch and was ready. And now is taking over this young team that is going to be a contender for the foreseeable future. So I think those are kind of the two things that it reminds me of, and it's two different directions where a team was, it's both, it's the same thing in the mindset that, we should be building for the future. We should be trying to win now, but we should be trying to win now, but we also need to think about the future. With the Titans, we did that same thing, and it went horribly. With the Packers, they did that same thing, and it looks like long-term, at least, it was the right choice, and it's got them set up for the next decade with a franchise quarterback. If it works out that way for the Falcons, then great. That's what they're hoping for. That's what Falcons fans are hoping for. So I'm not even going to bash that. I'm not going to say it was a bad pick. It was obviously the surprise of the first round, given that you just gave Kirk Cousins this big deal. Now, again, it's really only a 2-year deal. But it's, he hasn't even played a snap for you, and you're already drafting his replacement. It was surprising, but it might end up being great. It might end up being a definitive draft pick for the Atlanta Falcons franchise, the way that the Jordan Love pick was for the Falcons or for the Packers. On the other hand, it could be similar to what the Titans did when they looked towards the future too much instead of building for the present and traded away A.J. Brown and drafted, what's his name? Treylon Burks. So there are really two ways that could go. And we won't know for a while. We won't know for a long time how well this is going to work. But You know what? We'll see. And it's not done. Everybody's going to overreact to the first round, but there's 7 rounds to this thing. We still got a lot to do. The Falcons still have plenty of opportunities to improve their team, as does everybody. But we are going to go through and analyze some of my favorite picks, some of the picks that make no sense. I'm going to take a quick break, and I'll be right back. Alrighty, friends, welcome back. So we've got a lot on the docket today. I just pulled over and looked at my notes again, and we have a lot to talk about. So I'm going to try not to get too hung up on any one topic. And this may be an episode that goes long, where I have to continue it, finish it at the end of my workday. But we'll see. First thing is, I made a list of the teams who I liked who I really liked their picks, and teams that I might consider maybe won the first round. Number 1 is the Vikings. I think so far, they won the first round because they absolutely got exactly what they wanted, and they didn't give up. I mean, everybody had them, or not everybody, but the majority of experts, including myself, which I'm not saying I'm an expert, but in my mock draft, it seemed like the majority of the experts out there had them trading up to 3, 4, 5. I had them trading up to 5, which would have cost them both their first round picks this year. It would have cost them their first round pick next year, and depending on if it's 3 or 4 or 5, could have cost them another one. Could have cost them second round picks as well. I had them trading up to 5, which would have taken both of their first round picks this year, as well as probably a first round pick next year. But what did they do? They were patient. They stayed put. They ended up trading up 1 spot, but essentially gave up, like, I think a 4th and a 5th and got a 6th back or something. They didn't have to give up much at all, but they just went ahead and moved up 1 spot just to be safe, just to make sure that, I think that was to keep the Broncos or Raiders from getting ahead of them. And they got their guy. Now, I'm not a huge J.J. McCarthy fan, but I've said all along this is the one place that he could go where Kevin O'Connell could get the most out of him, where it just makes sense for him to be. And I love Kevin O'Connell as a coach. He obviously loves J.J. McCarthy. I think this is a great fit. So they got their guy, and they didn't have to give up much at all to get him. And then they've got another first-round pick there at 23, and really everybody thought that they were acquiring these picks, like getting that pick from the Texans, that 23rd pick, which I think it was the Texans, in order to have more ammunition to trade up to get a quarterback. So that was really probably what they were thinking, and then they were just able to pretty much stay pat and get their guy. They go ahead and they see that probably the best defensive player on the board is still available. The guy I have as the best edge rusher on the board is still available. And look, we didn't have to give up hardly any of what we expected. We got our quarterback already. Let's go ahead and trade up a little bit and grab this guy. So they go and they get Dallas Turner. So they may have just done exactly what Houston did last year in getting a franchise quarterback and a franchise edge rusher in the first round of the draft, and they didn't have to give up hardly anything to do it. Like, they gave up a little bit to trade up 6 spots from 23 to 17. They gave up a little bit to move up from 11 to 10, but it wasn't nearly what Houston gave up to go back up and get Will Anderson. They did that at 2 and 3 last year. The Vikings were able to do essentially the exact same thing and get maybe a franchise quarterback and maybe the best pass rusher in the draft, and they were able to do it at 11 and 17. The Vikings knocked it out of the park. I absolutely love what they did. And again, I'm not even a huge J.J. McCarthy fan, but I think him going to Minnesota, that's where he can be most successful. Now you're going to have Justin Jefferson, you're going to have Jordan Addison, you're going to have a great offensive-minded coach, you've got a good offensive line, you've got an improving defense who just added another weapon and a great guy to replace Danielle Hunter. The Vikings are looking good, and it's only round 1. I really like what they're doing. The Bears also, and I know that this is kind of an obvious one, but they didn't outsmart themselves, they didn't overthink it, they got their guy. They got the guy in Caleb Williams at number 1. And something I was hearing a lot about lately is how he's kind of eccentric and whatever. He paints his nails sometimes. And what's really cool is I heard on the radio today that now Bears fans have started painting their nails and I guess posting videos and pictures to like in support of him. I think that's fucking friggin' awesome. I love that they're doing that. Which, by the way, if people think that that's a new thing, I don't. Maybe it's a new thing for football players, but hell, I mean, goth kids and emo kids and people like myself, like what I was in high school. I was a scene kid. I was a bit of an emo kid. We've been painting our nails since hell that was since back in the '80s. But I guess it is a new thing for football players. But he is a Gen Z kid. He's open-minded. He's eccentric. He's charismatic. I mean, I've come to like Caleb Williams just over the last 24 hours, even more than I did, because I've said all along, he is the clear number one quarterback. I'm not going to say generational like some people, but he is clear number one. I really like him. They didn't overthink it. They got their guy. Now, then at 9, a lot of people were expecting them to trade back, and maybe that's what they wanted to do as well. But then they have Rome Odunze just basically fall into their laps. Rome Odunze is another guy that I wasn't as high on as many others were. I see him, and I think, I don't know why, but I keep thinking Mike Williams. He's got that big body. He's that, kind of big, muscle you out of the way receiver, maybe Michael Thomas type. And I'm just not always a huge fan of those guys. But he does have everything you can. He's a much better route runner than Mike Williams was coming out of the draft. He's very smooth. And he's got a big body. He's got good speed. He's a great route runner. So I don't know why. I felt like there was a gap between Harrison and Neighbors and then Odunze. But he does definitely have everything you could want and could be an elite X receiver. And Caleb Williams, number one guy for their entire careers. That's the plan. That's the hope. So I like what they did there. The Patriots, even though it was pretty much chalk, I like that they didn't outsmart themselves. They didn't overthink it. They took the guy they needed. Now, Drake May, you guys have heard me talk about Drake May for weeks now. I like him. I still think he's the second best quarterback in the draft. But he does need polish. He does need coaching. He does need to go to the right place. Is New England the right place? I don't know. I just don't. I mean, but then again, you couldn't have said that about Chicago or Washington either. Neither of those have offensive-minded head coaches. Neither of them are known to be good places for a quarterback. Neither of them have recognizable offensive coordinators or quarterback coaches. So I don't know that he would have been any better off in those places. If he could have gone to Minnesota or to the Rams, then that would have been a very positive thing. But you know what? I like Gerard Mayo, obviously, and maybe that's also just sort of a personal thing because he's a Vol. But I really like Gerard Mayo as a coach. I like his potential as a head coach. I don't know anything about their offensive coaching staff, but if they can get the most out of this guy, he is going to be a star. So I like that they didn't fall in love with any huge offers that talked them out of taking their guy. They didn't overthink it and end up taking McCarthy or Penix or something. They just did the obvious correct thing. And I do think he's going to be better than Jaden Daniels. The Giants, I also have them on my list because of what I said earlier. They took a great number one receiver. That was an area of need for them. Yeah, everybody wanted them to take a quarterback. Yeah, J.J. McCarthy's still sitting there. Michael Penix is still sitting there. But that would have been overdrafting, especially Penix. I said the comp for J.J. McCarthy is Daniel Jones with a better arm or Kirk Cousins with athleticism. And that's just not what the Giants need, I don't think. Now, if Drake May fell in their lap, then yes, absolutely do that. But they did not need to try. I mean, obviously, they couldn't have done that anyway. Those three guys, I think, were off the board no matter what. I don't know what anyone could have offered that would have gotten them Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, or Drake May. I think those guys were done. I think those picks were pretty much locked in no matter what the talk was, no matter what the rumors were. Those guys were never on the board for anybody outside of those three teams picking in the top three. So that leaves now McCarthy, Penix, and Nix. The Giants did not need to take any of those guys. They did what they needed to do. They took a receiver. I'm not a Daniel Jones fan, but I'm also not a fan of wasting a 6th overall pick on a guy that you're not sure about just because you want a quarterback. They got Malik Nabers. Malik Nabers is an explosive receiver. He, again, reminds me of Jamar Chase. I like what the Giants did. I don't think they have anything to bitch or whine. New York fans will always find reasons to bitch. I don't think they have any reason to do it right now. So, the Jets, also speaking of bitchy, whiny fans, bitchy, whiny New York fans, I actually like what they did. They move back one spot, acquire a little bit more draft capital, and still get the guy who they wanted all along, and the guy that I wanted, and that's Olu Fashanu. Now, I don't know. He, at the end of the college football season, was the consensus number one tackle in the draft. Hell, he was considered to be probably the number one tackle in the draft the year prior when he could have come out. But he decided to stay one more year, and honestly, it might have hurt him. Excuse me, let me get a sip real quick. But they trade back one spot. They don't fall in love with this idea of we've got to go all in with Aaron Rodgers right now. We've got to get a receiver. We've got to get Brock Bowers. We've got to get an impact, big time splashy pick. No, they pick the right guy. They pick a guy who, is probably going to come in and play guard for them to start the season until Tyron Smith gets hurt. And then when that inevitably happens, can slide on out to his natural position at left tackle. So you're going to be able to sort of ease him in. And if he reaches his ceiling, he's got the highest ceiling of any offensive lineman in this draft. So if that pans out, you've got a great one. And you do also have someone who can come in and help you right away. It's not like he's just going to sit. He's going to come in and play guard in week one. Whether it's on the right side or the left side, I don't know. But he will be on that offensive line week one. And then when Tyron Smith gets hurt, or if Morgan Moses gets hurt before him, then you slide him out. And then that's your left tackle for maybe the next decade. So I love what the Jets did. The Raiders... Honestly, when this pick first happened, I didn't like it. And the reason was because they just took Michael Mayer in the first round last year, right? It seemed like a little bit of a head scratcher. But, the more I thought about it, and look, I talked about this a few months ago during the playoffs. I think the tight end position might currently be undervalued. At least having an elite tight end. I don't know if we appreciate it right now. Look at the 4 teams who made it to the conference championship games and tell me, what did they all have in common? They all had one of the best tight ends, one of the best pass-catching tight ends in the game. It was the Lions against the 49ers. That's Sam Laporta. That's George Kittle. It was the Chiefs versus the Ravens made it to the AFC Championship, didn't they? Was it I think so. I think it was the Ravens and the Chiefs. And was it? Hell, I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it was. But it was Mark Andrews versus Travis Kelce. All 4 of those teams had 4 of the probably 5 best tight ends in the game. And I don't think that that's a coincidence. I think having a guy who can be a consistent over-the-middle threat, who no safety, no linebacker can cover, who opens it up for your receivers on the outside, and who can go up and make huge plays over the middle, I think that is very, very important in the modern NFL. And now the Raiders got, I think, maybe the second, third, fourth, at least a top 5 overall player in the draft. They didn't reach for a quarterback. They didn't get crazy and try to trade up for Penix or McCarthy. They were patient, and they got an elite player. And now, and you know, Antonio Pierce is going to want to play a lot of 12 personnel anyway. So you think about having Michael Mayer on one side of the line and Brock Bowers on the other. Yeah, we don't, Gardner Minshew's nothing special, but man, he has got something there. That's now the best tight end duo in football right now already. So that's not nothing. I know Raiders fans might be coming away feeling a little disappointed that they didn't get their quarterback. Maybe they try to get Spencer Rattler or somebody in the second round. Maybe they wait and grab Joe Milton and hope they can get the most out of him in the middle rounds. I don't know. But Gardner Minshew proved that he is a capable player in the NFL. I still think he's like a really good backup as or a below average starter. But there's no reason for them to do something that just wasn't possible. They were not going to get Drake May. They were not going to get Jaden Daniels. They were not going to get Caleb Williams. And everybody other than those three was not worth giving up the farm for, in my opinion. So I think the Raiders did the right thing. And again, it was a little bit of a head scratcher for me in the minute, just because in the moment, because they had just drafted Michael Mayer last year. But man, you think about that duo now, and they're going to be in 12 personnel a lot. That is going to be something. That's going to be hard to defend. And Gardner Minshew has got to be a very, very happy person right now. Devontae Adams out on one side, Jacoby Myers on the other side. Then on the line, you've got Michael Mayer and Brock Bowers. That's something to be excited about if you're a Raiders fan. And sure, we still, their quarterback position is obviously, it's the most important position, but you have a capable player in Gardner Minshew, and if you don't address the quarterback position later in the draft this year, then you'll do it next year. They're probably going to be about a 500 team, maybe a little above 500 this year. They play in a tough division, though. But adding Brock Bowers was probably a very, very good pick for the Raiders. The Seahawks also were a team that it felt like every single mock draft, including my own, had them penciled in to take, was it Troy Fontenot, or however you say his name, the guy who was the tackle, but it's probably going to switch into guard. That was just, it made the most sense. It was a position of need, but it was kind of boring. But what did they do? They saw a guy who might be the best defensive player on the board. There are several, in my opinion. I think Dallas Turner, Byron Murphy, Quinyon Mitchell, Terrion Arnold, and Latu and Verse. I think all of those guys have the claim of being potentially the best defensive player in the draft. So the Seahawks sitting there, in the teens, was it 16, and you get the best interior defensive lineman in the draft and maybe the best defensive player in the draft. And again, at worst, the top-rated interior defensive lineman, a position whose value is just going up and up and up in recent years. That was a good pick. That was a very, very sneaky good pick by the Seahawks. And then the Jaguars are the last one that I have on my list. Well, I've got actually one more, sort of. But the Jaguars, I hate it because, they're the Jags. They're our division rival. But they played this perfectly. They didn't get crazy and try to jump up and get a receiver or, a corner. They actually traded back. And did they trade back twice? No, I think they just traded back once and still managed to get the guy who was probably the guy they wanted all along. And that's Brian Thomas Jr., who has as much upside as any receiver in the draft. He is athletically just ridiculous. And he's big and he's fast and he's strong. He needs a lot of polish. And don't think he's going to come in and replace Calvin Ridley, because he's not. He's very different. You could say that they're both good receivers and deep threat receivers, but Calvin Ridley is an exceptional route runner and has kind of always been a polished elite route runner. Brian Thomas is not that. He's going to need some coaching. He's going to need some time. He's going to need some development. But if he reaches his potential, he can be a big time star in this receiver. And the thing about him, and this is something that I hadn't even occurred to me until a couple of days ago, and I heard somebody mention it on the radio, because all the attention has gone to Malik Neighbors, obviously, and for good reason. But this reminds me of a situation from just a few years ago and the same team when there were two receivers who were first round receivers. One of them was considered like a top 5 can't miss superstar receiver. The other was considered, probably late first round. And who were those guys? Jamar Chase was the star. Justin Jefferson was kind of number 2, right? How did that work out? Well, they both ended up being great players, but Justin Jefferson is now the best wide receiver in football. That could be Brian Thomas if he reaches his potential. I mean, he's not the same player. He's a different kind of receiver, but it's a very similar situation. Both LSU situations where, Jamar Chase is the one who everybody can't wait till he comes out in the draft. Justin Jefferson's just kind of, he's a, mid to late first round guy. This is the same thing, although Justin Jefferson came out a year before Jamar Chase, but when they were together, that's how they were viewed, as Jamar Chase is the superstar, Justin Jefferson's pretty good, though. And it's the same thing here. Malik Neighbors is the superstar, Brian Thomas is good, though. I'm not saying it's going to work out that way, but I'm saying that it's a pretty interesting comparison, dichotomy, whatever there between those two situations. And if he reaches his potential, he's a star, and they were able to trade back, acquire more draft capital, and still get him. Great job by the Jags. Then I have two others sort of together on my list, and they're the Chiefs and the Panthers. And the reason is because those are the two teams that just took advantage of the Buffalo Bills. I don't know what the Bills were doing. They obviously didn't like any of the guys who were still there enough. They didn't like Xavier Worthy or Legette, I guess, very much. That's the only thing that makes sense, because it's not like they were in dire need of more draft capital. I mean, they could use it, as could everybody. But, what did they even get? They couldn't have gotten much for either of those trades. But they only moved back one spot with the Panthers, so that's important. And depending on what they got, that might end up being a good trade for them, especially if they didn't like Xavier Legette. But to trade back with your biggest rival, I know they're not division rivals, but over the last several years, there has been no bigger rivals for either team than the Bills and the Chiefs. They are always, it seems like, facing off in the playoffs. They always play each other in the regular season, even though they're not division rivals. They always schedule it that way because it's Josh Allen and Mahomes. It's, this has been going on for years now. You give them, not only do you trade with them and allow them to go get something they need, but it's also the same position, maybe the same guy that you need. Now, I've been on record saying I would not take Xavier Worthy in the first round just because of the history of these kinds of guys. I think Adonai Mitchell is still a better receiver than Xavier Worthy. And most people did up until, shortly after the combine. And I'm kind of hoping that maybe the Titans can snag him along with some other players. And we'll dive into that in a few minutes. But if there's any one place he could go and reach his potential, it's Kansas City. And the Buffalo Bills just handed him to them. I mean, that is nuts. And then they got the 32nd pick. All right, so Adonai Mitchell's still there. Xavier Legette's still there. Ricky Pearsall had just been taken, but you still got Ladd McConkey if you like him. They trade back again. Now, they only moved back one spot, and I'd like to see, and when I pull over again, I'm going to look up and see what they actually got for that, because it might end up being a good trade. And the Panthers obviously just wanted to get back up into the first round, I think, so they could have a fifth-year option on this guy, and the Bills just didn't see that as a priority. And maybe what they got, maybe they got a fourth-round pick or something out of it and made it worth moving back one spot. But it's just still surprising the way they handled this. I mean, it could end up working out. If they take Adonai Mitchell at 33, then I would say the Bills did the right thing, probably, because I like him better than Worthy or Legette. If they take Keon Coleman, that might end up being, because I kind of have him as maybe, he and Leggett, I'd say, are probably even when it comes to like potential in my mind. But again, I don't believe in Xavier Worthy, but he did go to the one place where they can get the most out of him. So he could be special for the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, he's going to come in immediately and be the fastest player on a team that has, for the last several years been known for speed. Yeah. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the teams that really did well in the draft. The Vikings, I think, knocked it out of the park. I think the Bears did what they needed to do. The Patriots didn't outthink it themselves. They did what they needed to do. Giants, same thing. Jets, same thing. Raiders got one of the 4 or 5 best players in the draft at 13th overall and didn't panic and give up too much to get a quarterback. And the Seahawks got a great defensive player, and the Jags traded back and still got the guy they wanted. And the Chiefs and Panthers kind of took advantage of the Bills, maybe. So anyway, I'm going to take another quick break. Still got a lot on the docket, so buckle up. We'll be right back. All right, hey friends, back again. So I looked, and it looks like the Bills, if you're going by the charts, probably won those trades. The Chiefs won. If it was anybody else, I would say they did the right thing, and especially if they don't like either of those receivers, then they did the right thing. Just sucks to give the Chiefs that, but they got a 3rd rounder and a 7th rounder, it looks like, from the Chiefs. I don't know if they gave up anything else in it, but that's a good haul just to move back 4 spots. And then with the Carolina deal, only moving back 1 spot, they got a 5th rounder and gave a 6th. So they basically moved back 1 spot there into the 2nd round. So you lose that 5th-year option thing, but you only move back 1 spot. And then you basically trade up, 59 spots in the 5th round. So, decent deals if you don't like either of those guys. Both deals were good. Anyway, so what's left on the docket? Some stuff can wait. One thing I wanted to touch on really quickly is something that Nick Saban said, and you may have heard about this already. Nick Saban is on the ABC coverage for the draft, and Quinyon Mitchell gets drafted by the Eagles. So Nick Saban, new to TV, new to being a TV personality at least. I mean, obviously he's been on TV a lot, but new to being an analyst or whatever. He talks about how much he loves Quinyon Mitchell, and he says he was our top guy that we were trying to get to. I'm paraphrasing, but he said he was our top guy all along who we were trying to get him to go into the transfer portal. Now, for those of you who don't know much about college football rules, that is against them. That is considered tampering. You can't try to talk to a guy who's on another team and try to get him to go into the portal. Now, if he's already entered the transfer portal, obviously then you can talk to him and try to get him to come to your team. But you can't try to get a guy who's just on a team, try to talk him into entering the transfer portal. That's against the rules. So I wonder if any sort of investigation or anything's going to come of that. I mean, sure, lots of teams, I'm sure probably most teams do this to some degree, but to just flat out come out and admit it on TV, I mean, it's kind of like, I guess, Jim Harbaugh now leaving Michigan with all their sanctions, and he doesn't have to deal with any of that shit. And now Alabama wouldn't, or Nick Saban wouldn't have to deal with any sort of consequences for Alabama, so whatever. I don't know, but that was a very interesting admission, and I assume it was accidental. Now, going forward, what else did I have on the docket? I talked about the most of what I wanted to cover, I think, for the first round. Oh, what I really wanted to talk about, there's still several things, but what's really important is what's coming up now. Because at this point, the Titans, I have, what would it be, 39? Pick number 39 I guess it'd be the 7th pick, right, in the 2nd round. I'm not entirely sure. Where are we picking next? Sorry, let me pull over here for a second. We are picking with the 6th pick of the 2nd round, so that would be 39, I guess. And there are a lot of good players still available, and a lot of players who would really be good for the Titans. The ones who I have as my favorites, number one is probably going to be gone before our pick, and that's Jerzon slash Johnny Newton, who I thought was almost a lock to go in the first round. I can't believe he's still sitting there. He is the second best interior defensive lineman on pretty much every big board, and it's a position where we need help. We need help along the defensive line. You put him alongside Jeffrey Simmons, that is one hell of a duo right there. I would love to get him, but it feels like there's a very good chance he'll be gone before then. Cooper DeJean, I thought it was DeJean, but apparently it's DeJean. I'm not crazy about him, and I'm not even going to get into that, but he's still available. Mel Kiper absolutely loves him. Kool-Aid McKinstry is a guy who may not be like a big need right now, given that we have now L'Jarius Sneed, we have Chidobe Awuzie, we have Roger McCreary, but we still need help at safety, and we can always use depth. And I think Kool-Aid is a first-round caliber player. And given that a lot of people have DeJean as a transfer, or not a transfer, but a guy who would play safety in the NFL, maybe he would be a good fit for us because we do need to improve at the safety position. But those are three guys who are still available. My probably number two, though, favorite would be Adonai Mitchell. Again, I know we have Hopkins and Ridley and Treylon Burks, who could hopefully be a decent number three receiver, but we still need to improve there. We still need to give Will Levis weapons. I would love for us to be able to grab Adonai Mitchell because I have him as actually right there in that second tier, along with Brian Thomas, along with Xavier Legette. I also like Keon Coleman, although that's not traditionally my favorite, just personally, kind of receivers. He is one of those big body types, the T. Higgins, Mike Williams type, but I think he's kind of been underrated in this draft. He was considered a few months ago to be potentially a top 10 pick, definitely first half of the first round. I think he's just consistently falling down. I don't know if he had a bad combine or bad pro day or injured or what happened, but Keon Coleman is a guy who could be a very good addition and could kind of be like our next DeAndre Hopkins, given that, D-Hop's 33, I think now, or 32, and is on the last year of his deal. Adding somebody like Coleman could be a good future replacement and could have an impact right away. Adonai Mitchell, though, I just absolutely love him. I, again, think he's the best of the better pro of the two Texas receivers. I would love for us to be able to snag him. I would love for us to be able to snag Johnny Newton, Jerzon Newton, whatever his name is. Both of those guys very well could be gone by then, though. I also, one that might be a sneaky good pick, Edgerrin Cooper, out of the linebacker, out of Texas A&M. I think this would be about the right spot for him. I know nobody wants to spend a high pick on an off-ball linebacker nowadays, but that is an area where we need to improve, and he is the best one at that position in this draft. If he's still sitting there, I wouldn't mind us snagging him. I also really like the kid out of North Carolina State, Peyton Wilson. So I wouldn't be mad at either of those guys. I know a lot of Titans fans would probably be upset. I talked to a friend of mine at work this morning who's also a Titans fan, and he was pissed that we didn't take Rome Odunze, which I didn't want him. But, a lot of Titans fans still believe that we need a receiver. That needs to be our next top target. I don't believe that that's definite. I think edge rusher, defensive lineman, I think those are really honestly more important than receiver for the immediate success of the team. But if Adonai Mitchell's still sitting there or Johnny Newton, I would love for us to grab either of those guys. Those are my top two favorites that are still available for the Titans. I would also like Keon Coleman, also Edgerrin Cooper or Peyton Wilson. Who else is still available? There aren't. Chris Braswell might be a good pick. He was kind of the other guy on the other side of Dallas Turner. Don't know how well he's going to play as a pro, but he has the traits, he has the talent, the athleticism. I don't know. That could be a sneaky pick, but that would feel like maybe a little bit of a reach there. He feels more like a late second round guy. Lad McConkey, I know some people would probably like him. And, he could fit. He could come in and sort of be that slot receiver type for us. That might be a good addition, especially given the fact that, what's his name? Kyle Phillips can never stay healthy for more than a game or two. So there are lots of good options on the board. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of good options there for edge rusher, I don't feel like. And that would probably be, in my opinion, our second biggest position of need. But there are lots of receivers, a defensive lineman, like I said, so we've got options. And we don't have a third-round pick, so it would be very much on the table for us to try to trade back there with that early second-round pick. Teams are going to be calling for it. There are going to be guys they like. Don't know how much we could get or what we could, but we could use more draft capital and maybe trade back a little bit there. So there are plenty of options for the Titans, and hopefully, like I said, my ideal situation is either Newton or Mitchell is still sitting there and we snag one of those guys. If not, I like Cooper, I like Wilson, or I like us trading back. So we have options. Now, I've still got a lot of stuff, a few things left on the docket, but you know what? I'm going to be doing more episodes over probably the next couple of days anyway. We've still got 2 more days of draft, so I will maybe just go ahead and save that stuff for later. I talked about everything for the first round. This has already probably been a very long episode, so I want to thank everybody for listening, and I hope you learned something. I hope you were entertained. I don't know why you listen to me, but I do appreciate it very, very much. Stay tuned. Check out the podcast. Check out the YouTube channel. Find me on social media at HDW Pursley. We might do a live thing again on Saturday, maybe for the middle or for the late rounds. I don't know. We'll see, but we'll definitely be doing some stuff this weekend. So stay tuned, and I'll talk to you again soon. Love you. Bye.